Hello, and today we're going to go back and look at these if-else statements, but give you an alternative to use to them. So let's get out of this right away, and I'm going to introduce the first variable that we're going to have to do to update our wonderful form one grader, I guess we'll call it for now. And we're going to introduce a character called grade, because ultimately you're going to get an A, B, C, D, or an F. And we've already established that below here in this. But now I want to assign it because I'm going to do something called a switch statement. And I'm going to introduce a switch statement down here where I'm going to use this grade. But we have to actually give a grade out. So if I do get above a 90, I want the grade to be equal to an A. And notice the single quotes again. And the other nice thing about this is now that we have the curly brackets, adding an extra line isn't going to damage it. Remember, if we were going to go with a single line statement without the curly brackets, we could have done it with labtitle.text. But as soon as you have two statements, then they deserve a curly brackets. And I'm just going to do a copy and paste on all of these down here. So not giving anyone an A, but we're going to also update this with the new grade. And the last one, you want to make sure that it is not in the you should probably drop, because you want to give this grade to everybody who hits this else statement. Now, why did I do this? Well, in this case, this could be a little bit redundant, but it does show us how we can use a switch statement. Switch statements essentially are if-then statements, but they don't explicitly say it. So this case is essentially the first if, and then this is the else if, else if, else if, else if, and then finally we have a default, which is like an else itself. In fact, I'm going to bridge that gap just to make sure you understand that these are all working together. Now we put them in one gigantic curly bracket here. So instead of explicitly saying if and else if, we're going to say case. In other words, meaning if you can match this, then do this. If you can match this, then do this, etc., etc., etc. So what are you matching? Well, whatever we have up here. Up here we have the word grade. And that is going to be established by our if-else statements. And once we are given the essentially character A, B, C, D, F, it's going to put it here, and it's going to match this with each one of these cases. And whatever one it does, it's going to pick out and do this piece. And these should all look pretty similar to it. So in other words, they're all message box, but they show different pieces. So well done for an A, nice work, keep trying. Need some improvement, and the dreaded come see me statement. Maybe I shouldn't put the big capital S. And the default is if what happens if it falls in none of these, and then we can ask, what are you sure you're with this class? So there is a possibility that we could get like a negative grade, which would not fall, which actually would be caught by the F. And you could get an extra credit grade, which should fall in the A category. But just in case you didn't do that right, this would allow for you to catch this piece. Now, a couple other things I want to point out. The case statements always have a a colon after them as opposed to a semicolon. The message box, which we've done before, will take a semicolon. But this has to take the colon. And then if you notice, the other thing here is that all these guys have breaks. Break almost means exactly what it says. It's going to break out of whatever you're doing and then continue on. So if this comes down here and gives me an A, then it jumps out of this scope, which means that we have to get outside of the curly bracket. So as soon as it hits this break, it is not going to look at any of these guys. And that works, believe it or not just with switch statements, but with anything. It's always going to jump out of that scope. So that's just a traditional way. Otherwise, it could go from case A to case B to case C, etc., etc. And you don't want that. The one caveat or the one problem with switch statements is they're an exact match. So grade A has to be a capital A, and it has to mix with this A. That is why you don't see me putting numbers in here, because you want to, in numbers we'd have a range, right? 90 to 100 or 80 to 89.999. That is a little harder to do with case statements, and it's, to be honest, not really worth it. Case statements exist in a lot of different programming languages. Unfortunately, they're not all the same switch statements. So sometimes you only can use characters or integers. Sometimes you can use numbers. Sometimes you can use a whole host of things and guarantee it. That's one reason why I don't teach these a lot, is because you go to another place and you think, oh, I can use this type of switch statement anywhere. Well, not really. They're specific to usually the codes that they're in. They're not like if statements, where an if statement in C# is like C++, which is like Java, which is like JavaScript. They almost always look identical. So let's test this out then, if we think we got it right. And it says find your average, and we're going to put a 95. Well, again, using stepwise refinement, we want to test a couple different cases. So I'm going to do all 95 here, and look, it gives me the A, which is correct, the 95, which is correct, and the well done, which is correct. So let's do the same thing. What we say, 75, 85. So now this should give me a B. Nice work. Gives me a B and the 85 average. Okay, now let's put a couple zeros in there. So this is going to force it below a 60. We should get you failed. Your average is 25. Come see me. There we go. That's all you need to do. It works. And go ahead and have fun with this.